world first trial transfusion, transfusing lab-grown red blood cells, begins. Red blood cells, a trial testing how long a teaspoon-sized transfusion of lab-grown red blood cells lasts in the body, could revolutionize clinical care for people with blood disorders who require regular blood top-ups. The world first trial, underwent in the UK, is studying whether red blood cells made in the laboratory last longer than blood cells made in the human body. Although the trial is only small, it represents a huge stepping stone for manufacturing blood from stem cells. This is what University of Bristol cell biologist Ashley Toy, one of the researchers working on the study, says. To generate the transfusion, a team of researchers isolated stem cells from donated blood and coaxed them into making more red blood cells, a process that takes around 3 weeks. In the past, researchers showed they could transfuse lab-grown blood cells back into the same donor when they were derived from. This time, they've infused the manufactured cells into another compatible person, a process known as allogenic transfusion. Only 2 people have so far received the lab-made red blood cells under close monitoring, and no untoward side effects have been reported by the clinical team, according to a statement released last month. At least another 8 participants will receive 2 transfusions of 5 to 10 milliliters of blood, spaced at least 4 months apart. One transfusion will contain red blood cells provided by a donor. The other will have lab-grown red cells derived from stem cells from the same donor. Once transfused into the bodies of healthy volunteers, the manufactured cells, which are labeled with a tracer dye, will be tracked as they whiz through the body's circulatory system until they are worn out, gobbled up, and recycled. The lab-grown blood cells are all freshly made from donated stem cells, whereas a typical blood donation contains a swirling mix of new and months-old blood cells, so the researchers are hopeful the manufactured cells will go the distance and last longer. Earlier animal studies suggest so. The average lifespan of a human red blood cell is about 120 days. If the lab-grown cells can outlast donated blood cells, it could mean that in the future, patients who regularly need blood may not need transfusions so often. If our trial, the first such in the world, is successful, it will mean that patients who currently require regular long-term blood transfusions will need fewer transfusions in future, says Cedric Gevert, hematologist at the University of Cambridge and chief investigator of this trial. The red blood cell grown in the lab at Cambridge University hospitals, not only could the lab-grown cells reduce the frequency of blood transfusion from those in need, it could also help avoid complications linked to repeated infusions. For instance, patients with blood disorders such as sickle cell disease often need regular blood transfusions, relying on the goodwill of blood donors and good fortune to find the right match. A person with sickle cell disease will receive blood transfusions to replace the mishapped red cells their body makes to boost their oxygen levels. Meanwhile, multiple transfusions can cause iron to accumulate in the body, a complication known as iron overload. Given long-lasting red cells, the risk of accumulation iron could be reduced. Fewer transfusions could also lower the risk of repeated transfusion patients developing life-threatening immune reactions to specific donor blood groups. Too many transfusions of one blood type, and the body might start producing antibodies against it. One of the remaining questions is whether the process can be scaled up to produce greater volumes of blood needed in critical care. At the moment, we're only infusing 1 or 2 teaspoons to our volunteers, and normally for a transfusion, you would be transfusing 100 times that amount, explains trial investigator Rebecca Cardigan, a clinical scientist at the University of Cambridge. More research is also needed to understand at what point blood-derived stem cells tire of making red cells and need to be replenished with more donations. To go from here to the routine product of patients, there's obviously a lot more work that needs to be done that will take many years. Cardigan says in the video, and you can see the cells, how they are made. Now, while they won't replace the need for blood donors, if the lab-grown cells prove to be safe and long-lasting, they could transform care for people with complex transfusion needs. Manufacturing blood for those among us with ultra-rare blood types might also be a possibility. The need for normal blood donations to provide the vast majority of blood will remain, says Farrokh Shah, the medical director of Transfusion for UK National Health Service Blood and Transplant Unit. He says, but the potential for the work to benefit hard to transfuse patients is very significant. And this is on Out of Minds 2 by Claire Watson. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.